This is part 2 of warping my 36-inch backstrap loom to make a mat, the bottom half of a bedroll. I'm using one of my patterns to do it with. I had finished the first part of the video, with having the warp twined to the back beam, and it needed to be tightened at the front beam, where I had cut the warp, and I used the ability of cut this end of the warp. I knew I was going to have fringe, so I can cut the warp, I can tie it, I can tighten the warp exactly how tight I want it. I've done that. The warp is now, the whole loom is ready to be woven. And one thing I wanted to mention from the first video was when I originally started to warp this project, I had a cone of thread back here by the front beam, and I was going to thread the thread from the back beam through the heddle, from the front beam through the heddle to the back beam and back again. And I was going to singly thread it through the heddle that way. And I ran into a problem because you're actually pulling the one thread all the way through the heddle, and there's too much friction really for it to go easily. But there is a method that you can use that's almost as fast as the method I ended up using for this. And that would be to have your cone of thread by the front beam, bring a loop or a double thread up from the cone, go through the hole of the heddle, go up to the back beam, loop it around the back beam, come back to the heddle, and instead of going in the next hole or slot, go into whatever you used the first time. So on the first warp, you'd go up through the hole, around the back beam. When you come back, you go through the hole. You skip the slot, and you go through the hole. So then you go around the front beam with the loop, through the heddle again, through the hole, back up to the back beam, and then you continue that across the warp. And what that gives you is a 2-strand in each hole and nothing in the slots. So after you've done that, you can loosen the front beam warp, cut it, loosen it, and then stand or sit at the heddle and pull one of the double strands from a hole through the slot. Then go to the next slot, pull one of the double strands from the hole into the slot, so that you're moving one warp strand that is in a hole to the slot to the right of it. And it takes a little longer that way. It's easier to run the warp, it's faster to run the warp onto the loom, but then you have to take the extra step of sitting down or standing if you have it hung and pulling one string through each slot. But it does still work. It's very fast. I'll probably use that when I'm doing the blanket part of this pattern, which is for a heavier yarn. On this, what I've done right now and what's on the loom, I actually have 2 strands through each slot and each hole. But when I switch to the blanket part, which is yarn, probably a worsted weight yarn, I'll have a single strand through each hole or slot of the heddle. And so I'll probably use that other method when I warp this for the blanket part. But for now, as you can see, I've tied it to the frame. I bring it in at night. I don't want to leave my heddle outside. I've tied it to the frame. I've added 4 tension rods that are actually bamboo. I have bamboo that grows in my yard, so I just cut some bamboo, and this is duct tape or masking tape on the ends, because that way the sticks don't loosen up and come out of the warp. So I have 4 tension sticks keeping the top end of the warp in place, and then a big gap, then the heddle, which of course will be moving. And if I were going to start weaving right now, I could step into my backstrap which is right now parked on a stake. Pull the heddle down as far as it'll go to make the first shed, and start weaving. So that's part 2 of warping the backstrap loom for this kind of a project, the way that I do it, and I'm ready to weave.